Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we're looking at Jesus grieving over Jerusalem. Yesterday we looked at Jesus teaching about entering the kingdom, and today he hits on again. We're studying this in chronological order, and so he ended yesterday with talking about the greatest being or I'm sorry, the least being the greatest, and the greatest being the least in the kingdom, and so after that we catch up. I want to teach from this comes from Matthew 23 verses 37 through 39 and Luke 13 verses 31 through 35. I'm going to come from Luke's account just because it has a little bit more detail. I usually like to go from Matthew's accounts just because usually he has the more detail, or goes in a little bit deeper, but Luke does in this case. And so Luke starts in verse 31 and says, at that time some Pharisees said to him, "Get away from here if you want to live. Herod wants to kill you." And so we're going to talk about that a little bit because that seems to go against what they had been doing. And Jesus replied, "To go tell that fox, I will keep on casting out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and the third day I will accomplish my purpose." He's referring to the resurrection. Yes, today, tomorrow, and the next day I must proceed on my way. For it wouldn't do for a prophet of God to be killed except in Jerusalem. He's foreshadowing what's coming up. Oh, Jerusalem. Then he switches to the subject of Jerusalem. Oh, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers. How often I've wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now look, your house is abandoned, and you will never see me again until you say blessings on the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And so what we have here, right, in these two sections, if you want to read Matthew 23 37 through 39, it says pretty much the exact same thing without a little bit of the intro. It's just what it kind of mimics the second half of what Luke said. We know that Jerusalem was the capital city of God's chosen people. It was the ancient home of David and Israel's greatest king, and the location of the temple, right? It was the earthly dwelling place of God. It was intended to be the center of worship of the true God, right, as a symbol of justice to all people. But Jerusalem, had become blind to God, and sensitive to human needs, and so we see because of that the depth of Jesus's feelings for his lost people, right, and his beloved city, which would soon be destroyed. That's the that's the one thing that he's mourning over Jerusalem. We're going to see this again. Um, when he talked about it, because he knows Jerusalem and the temple itself is going to be destroyed. They literally destroyed the entire temple. Nero does, and just shoves the whole thing over off into the valley. And you can still see part of that today. Yes, some of it's been rebuilt kind of a little bit, but not anything like it was before. And so the entire thing was laid waste. And so, he knows what's coming even after his resurrection. And so he's kind of grieving over Jerusalem and how they are. But this reference here to to its people is, it just shows the love and kindness and grace and mercy he has for the people of Jerusalem, not necessarily the Pharisees and religious leaders, but it's because of the way they've treated their people. And so um we see this, and it's then we see the Pharisees, at the beginning of this, saying, "Hey, you need to leave because Herod's going to try to destroy you." Well, it's like, why would they do that? Because here's the thing: the Pharisees weren't interested in protecting Jesus from danger. They weren't. They wanted to kill him. We see that. They were trying to trap him themselves. So we know that they were urging Jesus to leave because they wanted to stop him from going to Jerusalem, not because they feared Herod. They were trying to keep him from going to Jerusalem, and that was their main motive here. But we know, right, Jesus's life work, he knew that he had to be, where his crucifixion was going to be, where his resurrection was going to be. And so, he basically let him know he was going to do what he wanted, and Herod wasn't going to stop him, and the Pharisees weren't going to stop him. His life was planned and directed by God himself, and his mission would unfold in God's time. We've talked about this before, and according to God's plan. God knew exactly, and Jesus knew exactly when he was going to die, where he was going to die, and how all that was going to take place. And they made sure that that happened. And we see here, going back to his care for he talks about the hens, how he wants to, and this is how a hen protects her chicks. And this is Jesus's, how he wants to do that, but he's not able to, right? He's not able to do it. He has all this inner. I'll say he wasn't able to. I mean, he could have done anything he wanted, but he wasn't able to do that. He wanted to, but in this process couldn't. And so he wanted to care for all these people. He wanted to take care of them, but just because of the way things are and the way things were, he could not do that. And so, but he does want, but he can do that in a spiritual sense now, right? Is because he wants to protect us if we come to him, because we can, right? We can. And he tried to protect as many of the people that he could while he was on this earth in his human form. And so he does that with us now spiritually. When we come to him, we are protected by him when he comes. So now it does, again, like we've talked about, doesn't mean bad things won't happen to us. Doesn't mean that, you know, everything's going to be peachy and rosy all the time. But spiritually, he can protect us and keep us safe no matter what. And that's the wonderful thing about him. And so many times, right, we hurt and we don't know where to turn, but we have Jesus we can always turn to. But a lot of times we reject Jesus's help because we don't think he can give us what we need. And we see this a lot with the Pharisees. We see this a lot of the people in Jerusalem at that time. Some would come to Jesus and others would reject him. And so the main thing I want you to get out of this is that, Jesus, he still grieved over things. He still had sadness over things. Even, it's like, well, he's God. He knows how everything's going to be. But he still has that. Even, yes, he knows it all. He knows it's going to happen, but he's still in that moment, in that time, still grieves over it when it happens. We see it when he sees people who are hurting or suffering, where he has compassion for them, so much so that it turns, basically turns his stomach and does that. So as we see this, play out, we're going to see more and more of the emotional side of Jesus as he goes through. And we're going to see him really mourn over Jerusalem as he enters Jerusalem, because he knows what's coming. He knows the pain and the grief. And this was a little bit of a hint, how he wants to protect them. But he knows what's going to happen to Jerusalem because of everything, the way everything works out, and because of their rejection of him. And he knows what's going to happen and how horrible it's going to be. We'll talk about that later. So we see that we see that compassion that Jesus had. And that's the main thing I want to get through this, is that, Jesus does care, even though, because we live in this world, it's a broken world, right? And Jesus knows that it's a broken world. And sometimes he knows bad things are going to happen to his people, but he still cares about them and he still grieves over them. But he's definitely more than anything there to protect us spiritually. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching. If you don't mind, please share these if they're helpful. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do so. And as always, thank you for watching.